Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vivienne Ming to the stage.
Wow, this is absolutely blinding. That's a little bit better. And I suppose I'm supposed to pick which kind of percussion I'm going to do my performance with. AI for Good played on the congas would be interesting. I only have 20 minutes, and this idea of using artificial intelligence in any fashion, much less for good, really merits more than that. I'm sure this is a pretty sophisticated audience, but you could start just with what the hell AI really is beyond something you're supposed to invest in, or what good is, for that matter. There are, of course, whole disciplines devoted to studying good. I actually think AI for Good is sort of a weird title right from the start, despite that it's mine. It's like saying hammers for good. AI is just a tool. It does good because you do good. And I've done a fairly interesting career, very diverse, starting my life as an academic, and what are you seeing? You're seeing? And I'm momentarily cut off. All right, how about another one? Or not, I don't need slides. So there we go. So I've been an academic, a neuroscientist. I've been a machine learning researcher. I've started a bunch of companies. I think the little purple one with the fishes, like the one swimming in the other direction, that's supposed to be the entrepreneur. In my experience, most entrepreneurs are feverishly swimming in exactly the same direction as everyone else. And the very small number of successful entrepreneurs are just very giant sharks that have figured out what direction everyone else is swimming in order to get a good lunch. I'm a mom. I'm a lot of different things. But in the last few years, I've been perhaps the coolest job that there is. I've been a professional scientist. And that means I get to go around the world and use all of these techniques, entrepreneurialism and artificial intelligence and brain science and economics, to try and help solve problems for good for free. My life has been very good to me, and this is my opportunity to try and build a world that's a little bit better. So in a very short time, I'm going to try and talk about what AI for Good is, off and on, in two different ways. One is, of course, actually doing something good, like something demonstrably, measurably making the world a better place. And frankly, anybody could do that. But I've got an interesting story, so I'll share it with you. And the other is a much more nuanced problem, which is bad. All right, this keeps going on and off. We're just going to have to deal with it. So AI for not bad is a totally different question. You're using machine learning. You're using these automated computer-based systems to do something in the world. How the hell do you know you're not making things worse? And in some magical way, in a very short time, I'm going to try and jam these two things together. But let's start with the story. I got my start in machine learning as an undergraduate when I did a research project, one of the first ever, in reading facial expressions. So these were computer-based systems that in real time were meant to see if you were happy or sad. You see a demo of that with one of the principal researchers on that project running in real time on that screen. Now, 20 years ago, that was incredibly hard. This was just science back then. As it turns out, it was science funded by the CIA. And in fact, we weren't doing emotion recognition. We were doing lie detection. Now, for many people in the world, doing lie detection for the CIA might come across as ever so slightly morally gray. Occasionally, when I tell these stories and I'm visiting a country that had had the government toppled by the CIA at some point in their history, it's worth maybe being very cautious in sharing this. But I have to be honest, it was incredibly cool. I got to build these systems that could just look at someone and figure out who they were, where their face was, and whether they were happy or sad, whether they're having a good day, actually build this thing that learned and changed. I was actually intending to be a neuroscientist, and then I was introduced to this world of machines. And I thought, one, this is so much cooler. I get to build a brain and a computer and teach it how to do things, and also, it's just a lot fucking cleaner. There's no brains you have to deal with afterwards. It's just a computer. So it was great, and I got to work on it. But later, I really wanted to think that there was something better I could do with this. Something that would make a more positive difference than just an abstract research project sponsored by the CIA. And a few years ago, I was given an early release pair of Google Glass. So anyone here that doesn't know what Google Glass is, this is a wearable computer. It's like a pair of glasses, and it has a camera and a computer. It's like a smartphone in your head. A really tasteless test to your head. And I wore this thing 3 years. No one at Google wore it that long. The original head of the Google Glass project actually met me once and thanked me for being willing to wear them for as long as I did. I actually wore it to the White House once, and it made a lot of security people very unhappy that I had a live camera on my head with a computer attached to it. But there was a reason. In fact, there were 2 reasons why I wore Google Glass for 3 years running. And they both happened to relate to my son. One was a totally different story, which I'm not going to go into today, but 7 years ago, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I hacked all of his medical equipment, broke several federal US laws, as it turns out, and I built the first ever artificial intelligence for treating diabetes. And I got updates in real time pushed to my Google Glass. You want to get people to wear a really terrible pair of glasses that are fluorescent blue to a White House black tie party? Give them a superpower. I knew from Washington, D.C., that my son in San Francisco was healthy. But the other reason I wore them was I had this idea. I could take the technology we developed with the CIA to do real-time expression recognition. You can imagine doing all sorts of things. I could have just do exactly what we were trying to do with the CIA, which is lie detection. All right, this is going to work out a little better. Thanks. All right, so lie detection. So I could just look across the audience and see who's lying. Maybe I could pull your credit reports up and float your credit scores over everyone's heads. I could look at you and pull up your LinkedIn account, or Facebook, or Grindr, or Ashley Madison, if you're into that sort of thing. I could do all sorts of terrible things. What I did was I built a system for autistic children. One of the most common symptoms of autism spectrum disorder is an inability to read facial expressions. They can learn how, but it's like a second language. They have to actively learn how. And I had this idea that what I know from my research in education, which is that our brains process social information fundamentally different than static. The state of the art at the time was smiley faces on flashcards. You just show, this is a happy face, this is a sad face. Frankly, it's probably still the state of the art today. We built a system so that the child could wear it and in real time look at another person and see that they're smiling or that they're frowning. And one of the interesting things is that not only does it work as a prosthetic, okay, they never learned, but at least now they know. But in fact, they did learn, and they learned very well, but they also learned something else. Those flashcard faces are smiling, and they are frowning, but never for a reason. There's no story behind those emotions. One of the other most common symptoms of autism is a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding other people. Turns out the kids that learn to read facial expressions in real social interactions also learned empathy. And this is an opportunity to genuinely transform someone's life. It's not about curing autism. It's about taking someone who's different and being able to connect them with the rest of the world in a way that they would never have been able to do on their own. An interesting little addendum to this story, as you might recognize from the screen there, is that startup, that lab where we did the original CIA project, spun off as a startup, sort of struggled along for a couple of years trying to find its feet because, frankly, what is emotion recognition as a product? When do you need that? There's a lot of AI companies out there whose product is AI. Again, that doesn't make any sense. AI does something. Do something with it. Sell that. But in this case, it was emotion recognition. And they struggled for a little while. Then deep neural networks came along, and the performance of these things went through the roof, and they still were trying to find their feet. And then they had this great idea. It was about 3 some odd years ago. The US Republican presidential debates were going on. And most Americans, and I assume most people around the rest of the world, were trying to figure out whether Donald Trump actually has human emotions. So I know that's an easy joke to make in most places of the world, but that's because he's a joke. So they had this clever idea. We're going to run a real-time expression recognition on all of the Republican candidates at the same time while they're on the stage, so you could see whether any of them really experience human emotions. But it was fascinating, and it had the desired impact. The very next day, the bidding war started between Facebook and Apple. And Apple won. So now your iPhone 10 understands love. Actually, probably slightly more accurately speaking, it understands how to exploit the human weakness of love, but you know, it's all the same. So what you're seeing here actually is Apple's Emoji System, where you express emotions, you move your head around, and on the other end of a call, it animates whatever, a cat. It's interesting because this is 20 years ago, what we were talking about doing, and you know, you wait long enough, you add enough processor time, you know, tens of millions of dollars of research money, dozens of graduate student dissertations, and you get the end result of all innovation. Anywhere on the internet, it animates cats. That's whatever you do, that is all that ever comes of your hard work. But it was neat. It was neat to see an actual outcome for them. They all work at Apple now, which means they can't talk to anyone ever again. Apple's a bit of a weird and slightly creepy place. Here's another one. In this one, I'm actually showing you a part of a neural network learning about faces. This is a slightly different algorithm, one I developed myself, and it uses much more like a deep neural network structure. Again, I'm not going to spend my time explaining what these are. They're buzzwords. That's good enough. In fact, if you really want to understand what AI is in a very practical, real-world sense, modern AI, it's any brief, expert human judgment made cheaper, faster, and better than a human can do it. If you're paying some very expensive financial analyst or lawyer or doctor or engineer to do the same thing every day because it's the only way you can get it done, all of that is going to go away and get replaced by little software projects by jerks like me. But again, I like doing other things. So we built this system, and if you try to think about what this is, it's a language of faces. In fact, in the literal terminology of my field, that's a dictionary. It just happens to be a dictionary of faces. You're seeing a tiny number of face words, and if you combine any face word together, you can actually create any face in the world. And the system just learns it from looking at faces. So all this system did was it wandered through Facebook, and it learned about the facial structure of faces. But it didn't end there. We created a little game. We built this amazing AI. And I was a first-time entrepreneur. I had an amazing AI that could learn all these cool things. What do you do? So I built an incredibly sleazy game called Sexy Face. So in Sexy Face, you show up at a website and you play a game. We show you an array of faces and you tell us which ones you think are sexy. And for free, we'll figure out everyone on the internet or everyone on Facebook that you think is sexy. For free. And for $5, we'll find everyone who thinks you're sexy. So it was the best business idea ever. But unfortunately, I'm not a horrible person. So in reality, that's what's called a Trojan. People would show up at the site, play Sexy Face. It would actually learn. Whatever their kink is, it would figure it out, unless it was a foot thing, I guess, that exists in the world. I once said, but there's no good databases of feet to train a neural network to learn people's kinks. Turned out I was very, very wrong about it, and I was much happier knowing that I was wrong about it. So we built this thing, and people would play a game, and it would learn their thing, and then it would confess, actually, it's just a mind-reading game. Come up with any facial feature at all, and we'll figure it out. South Asian, mutton chops, and a sense of ennui. Well, as long as you were consistent about how you made the judgments, even if you couldn't articulate what ennui was, the system would learn it. For example, we had people go through and rate faces for competence. And our AI could learn to distinguish not just competent people from incompetent people. It learned to distinguish CEOs from non-CEOs based on those competence ratings. It could actually distinguish CEOs of large public corporations from small private ones. Somewhat disappointingly, it couldn't actually predict the business performance of the companies themselves. It turns out it wasn't really predicting competence or discovering competence. You might not be shocked to know that in America, a competent face was simply an old white guy. So that's what the system learned, is what people told it. And if it wasn't actual competence, it learned what they thought it was. So we built this thing. And again, just like the system for Google Glass, there's all sorts of things you might be able to do with a system that could learn not just how faces are structured, but by how people actually perceive faces. Not just their physical qualities, but our perception of them, their emotional content, their latent qualities that are so hard to articulate. What we did was we built a system for a project called Refugees United. It turns out, at the time of this project, which was about 10 years ago, there were 1 million orphan refugees in refugee camps around the world. Not in the history of the camps, at that moment. And the way they tried to reunite these orphans with their extended family was to keep a book with 1 million photographs in it. And if you were living in Syria, and maybe now, and you're fearing the worst because you haven't heard from your sister's family in months, and you go to Jordan, to a refugee camp, and you're looking for your niece, they give you a book, and you come back day after day, leafing through the book, and I hope you don't blink as your niece goes by. So by building this incredibly sleazy and trivial game and having people play it, we built an AI that could then be put onto a tablet. And we could take all the faces of these kids and show a random sampling of them to that uncle. And then he picks out, my niece looks a little more like this kid, a little bit more like this one. And what happens is within about 3 to 5 minutes, if she's in a camp anywhere in the world, he found her. Now, there's all sorts of things you can do with artificial intelligence that could make you lots of money. Again, building a company that sells artificial intelligence doesn't strike me as a good one, but there are a lot of things that you could do. But if you actually wanted to build something that makes a difference in people's lives, all you have to do is get started tonight. The world is filled with incredibly hard problems, many of which exist only because there aren't enough experts to go around. If AI is any brief expert judgment, made cheaper, faster, and better than a human can do it, think about any task, whether it's here in Belgium, throughout the EU, around the world, where you could transform a problem by changing its economics. We built these things like now I'm running long, too bad. So we built these things like the treatment for my son's diabetes. We built, I don't have enough time for that. We built a system that could predict manic episodes in bipolar sufferers. I work in neuroprosthetics, actually putting computers in people's heads to treat brain injuries and traumas. We explore the future of work, so many things that genuinely need help and attention. And all you have to do is get started today, because AI is just a tool. Unfortunately, that means it can't solve your problems for you. If you don't know how to solve the problem, AI won't figure it out. It's not some magic thing where you throw a ton of data at an algorithm and it comes up with the perfect solution. Believe me, there are plenty of people in machine learning and AI that think that is exactly what it does. And they are destined to make the world a worse place. If you know how to fix something that's seriously wrong with this world, you can use that. You can build a tool that can actually change people's lives. And when we build these tools, we give them away. It's the best, most immediate way I can save a life. So it's not part of my talk about AI for good, but in that lower section that says meta-learning, I get to study all the things that predict positive life outcomes. Longer, healthier, happier, more impactful lives. One of those things is purpose. Purpose is a strong predictor. It is a component in almost all good lives. And the way we measure it is sacrifice. And we actually measure it with AIs. We build little AIs and they look at people's behavior, evidence of sacrifice for something that's bigger than them. We look for when old men plant trees. So if you want to use AI for good, all you have to do is find something worthwhile and go out tonight. Don't wait. Don't wait till you're rich. Don't wait till you figure out how to program. Tonight, go out and plant a tree. Thank you very much.